Let's head back to Scarborough. We're listening to this announcement about bail reform. Let's listen in.
The status quo cannot continue. Everyone has a right to feel safe in their own community, and enough is enough. We can never take our public safety for granted. And recently, we've seen a new level of brazenness from those who wish to do harm. And when we see this behavior, we must call it out. We must act. When it comes to keeping people safe and addressing crime in our communities, we will stop at nothing. And as Solicitor General, keeping Ontarians safe and addressing crime in our communities will always be my top priority. We are assisting police and our justice sector partners to address issues of bail compliance and help ensure that both sentencing and bail processes actually work to reduce violent acts and keep our communities safe. The rule of law must matter, and our public safety must matter. And that's what today is all about. In closing, I want to thank Premier Ford again for making public safety a priority, because a safe Ontario is a strong Ontario. We won't wait. We won't sit by. We will listen and we will lead. We are going to help fix a broken system. We will continue to do everything we can to keep Ontario safe. Thank you. And now it's my honor and privilege to turn it over to our Premier, Premier Doug Ford.
Well, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of Minister Kersner and Minister Downey, I just want to acknowledge the great job the Solicitor General and the Attorney General are doing day in and day out, along with Chief Demkew, thank you, and with Superintendent Greg Watts right here at 42 Division. And Greg, did you try to set me up? I walk into the prep room and there's a box of Krispy Kreme donuts. I'll tell you, that's my weakness, but I didn't touch them. Deputy Chiefs Pogue and Johnson, thank you, and everyone at 42 Division in Scarborough for hosting us today, along with Mark Baxter from Police Association of Ontario, John Reid from the Toronto Police Association. I also want to acknowledge our local caucus MPPs David Smith, Harris Babikian, Vijay Thanagaslam, and Minister Cho. They're all doing a tremendous job representing the great people of Scarborough. It's also great to see our OPP Commissioner Thomas Kourik and all of our policing partners from associations right across the province. Thank you for joining us. It's always a privilege and an honor to be alongside the brave women and men in uniform who put themselves in harm's way every single day to keep our communities safe. Friends, it's no secret. Across Canada, we're facing a growing wave of crime. In our big and medium-sized cities, small and rural communities, we're seeing increases in auto thefts, assaults, break-and-enters, and random acts of violence on public transit and on our streets. And here in Toronto, major crime is up over 20% compared to the same time last year. And they're up even higher right here in 42 Division. I can tell you, people don't feel safe. That's why earlier this week, we announced new measures to get more boots on the ground in every part of our province. And friends, while we work together with our police services to address policing shortages, we urgently need bail reform. We're seeing too many innocent people lose their lives at the hands of dangerous criminals and repeat offenders who should have been behind bars. In fact, over the past 2 years, 17% of people accused of gun murders right here in Toronto were out on bail for other firearm charges. That's unacceptable. It has to stop, and we'll make sure it stops. We can't have a justice system that fails to protect innocent people, a justice system where bad guys are allowed to run free, a justice system that has an open-door policy where violent criminals are arrested one day and let back out on the streets the next day. That's why earlier this year, I asked premiers right across the country of all political stripes to join me in calling on the federal government to make criminal code changes to fix Canada's bail system. This isn't a political issue. It's a public safety issue. And I'm so pleased that the federal government is taking this issue seriously and has agreed to work with us. Here in Ontario, we're doing our part to keep high-risk, violent reoffenders in jail where they belong. Today, we're pleased to announce $112 million in new funding for programs aimed at improving bail compliance. This funding includes investments to create a dedicated team of police officers to catch high-risk provincial offenders who aren't following their bail conditions or unlawfully at large. This funding includes new money for the OPP, municipal and First Nations police services to set up dedicated bail compliance teams to assist prosecutors with gathering evidence and assessing public safety risks during the bail hearing stage. We're also giving special teams of prosecutors the time and resources they need to conduct in-depth bail hearings for accused offenders deemed to be high risk. And we're investing in new technology to better monitor people out on bail. Together, these investments will help ensure that the most high-risk offenders remain in jail, and those accused of crimes and out on bail follow the rules. Our government is doing everything we can to support and protect our police officers, our communities, and our people. We're tackling rising crime rates by arming local police services with the resources and the tools they need to do their job. We're fighting back against guns and gangs. We're supporting those who need help with their mental health and addictions, while also making sure that our frontline officers are better equipped to respond to mental health crisis. We're bringing in reinforcements and getting more boots on the ground. And we're making sure the most dangerous criminals are locked up behind bars and not creating havoc on our streets. As Premier, I'll do whatever I can, whatever it takes to keep our province safe. Thank you all for joining us today, and may God bless the men and women in uniform, and may God bless the people of Ontario. Thank you.
We'll now go to the floor for questions. If reporters asking questions could please line up at the microphone behind me. Just a reminder, it'll be one question and one follow-up. First question.
Hi, it's Chris Rishowie from the Toronto Star.
Hi, Chris.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how these new teams are going to work and how many new jobs will be created out of this money today.
Well, that's probably a good question for the Solicitor General, along with the Commissioner and the Chief DEMQ. So, Solicitor General.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The over $110 million is being invested to help keep our community safe today, and specifically $48 million will be available over 3 years to the OPP for the Repeat Offenders and Parole Enforcement Unit. It'll provide them with about 50 additional people for their units over the next few years. That'll go a long way to strengthening their enforcement unit. We're also providing $24 million that will be available for grants for the police services in Ontario, which will include First Nations police as well, so that they can beef up their own enforcement units as well.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Premier. Just to expand on the Solicitor General's comments, this will mean that our Repeat Offender Enforcement Unit will go from 5 teams across the province to 10 teams. It means that we will have greater capacity to not only identify, but hold accountable those repeat violent offenders that pose the greatest risk to public safety in a coordinated way right across the province in partnership with our municipal and First Nation policing partners. This is a great day for the province of Ontario, and in terms of numbers, I can tell you that on the OPP, we're currently hiring a class of 135, and I can speak on behalf of Chief Demkew. I'm sure he's hiring just as many. So for anyone interested in a career in policing, today's the day to apply, especially with the announcement earlier this week that there's no more tuition fees at the college. So we're hoping that this will also spark an interest in a very dedicated profession that is absolutely critical to our communities. Thank you.
And thank you again, everybody, for being here, and thank you for that question. I'll just elaborate one step further and pick up on a point made by the president from the Toronto Police Association. There was a time when we had bail compliance units in every single one of our divisions. We are now going to be able to take a look at our model to reconstitute our capacity at the local divisional level, which really means being responsive to the local community level, because that's where decisions are being made operationally to serve our communities locally. And in the context of the Toronto Police, it's at the local divisional environment, and this funding will provide us an additional capacity to do that. Thank you. And before I leave, I will echo the Commissioner's comments. We are indeed hiring. We are indeed very focused on creating the capacity to better respond to our core service needs. And certainly this week is a representation of incredible support that the police and community needs to make that possible. Thank you.
And just to reinforce that it's an all-of-government approach, we're investing $26 million over 3 years for intensive bail review, prosecutors, and back office support, so the whole system can function at a higher level.
Thank you. And a few references were made by yourself and your ministers that people don't feel safe. Was that in Toronto or Ontario? And have you heard from people that they feel unsafe?
I hear from people almost every single day, especially in Toronto. You see the numbers. You feel people feel when they go on the subway, they're concerned. They feel nervous if they're walking late at night. We live in Toronto. We don't live in Chicago or New York or some of the other areas. I lived in Chicago. There's some really bad areas. We're going to make sure we aren't like the Chicagos of the world. And we're going to make sure that we have the proper resources, the proper tools to give our police services right across the province to make sure that people are safe, they feel safe and feel comfortable. For decades, everyone so proud. And I still feel, compared to large cities across North America and our great police services, they do an incredible job. But we have to make sure people are feeling comfortable like we have for decades living here in Toronto.
Hi, Premier. Alison Jones with the Canadian Press.
Hi, Alison.
The announcement talks about part of this money going towards new bail compliance technology. I'm wondering if you could give me some examples of that and how it will help. Are we talking ankle monitors or what?
I think this is best answered by either the Solicitor General or Attorney General. Which one?
Thank you, and thank you for the question. You know, I have to really congratulate Durham Police Services and Toronto Police Services for coming up with an amazing piece of technology, which is this dashboard. And we will be able to bring it to a much larger scale than was piloted by Toronto Police Services and by Durham. It'll be something that the OPP is taking on that will be rolled out all over, and we'll be able to keep a very fine-tuned look on where people who are violating bail are, and we will be able to identify and to communicate with the local police services in the different jurisdictions where they are, so we can get them before they cause crime.
And for you, Premier, yes. on the Science Centre,
yes.
You had said that the employees were excited about the move, but the union that represents about 400 of them says they're angry, they're confused, they're worried about job losses. I'm wondering both what you based your statement on, and also if the move to a smaller facility is going to mean job losses.
Oh, great question. Guess where I just came from? The Ontario Science Centre. I drove by it, looked at the big, huge parking lot sitting there. But that's the city of Toronto. We're taking care of the actual Ontario Science Centre itself. And just to mention, I think the world of the people that work there, we've seen, people going through the Ontario Science Centre drop by 30%. I mentioned 40%. I apologize if I was incorrect the other day, but 30%. Well, to the great employees there, do you know what happens in the private sector? When your sales are down 30% and we see a decline every single year from 30 to 40 and it's going to keep going, we don't need as many people. I want to make sure all the 400 people that are there are going to be employed. I want to make sure that we have a destination, that we see more and more people and tourists, along with the school buses that I saw over there, come through a state-of-the-art Ontario Science Centre. And you go by the Ontario Science Centre, and inside, it's run down. They're using 25% of the space. We're going to make sure that we have 300,000 square feet of exhibits right across the Ontario Science Centre. We're going to put it in a place that tourists come day in and day out. We're building a destination at Ontario Place, second to none. It's going to be world-class, more importantly, year-round. Folks, we have two choices here. We do what the previous government did for 15 years and just totally ignore it and let the status quo and watch the Ontario Science Centre just die. And Ontario Place, weeds growing up to your ankles around there, run down. Or we're going to build something world-class, something, just absolutely amazing for tourists right across the world and our country and the province to visit. And the only difference is the previous government, they did nothing. We're a government that gets things done.
Hi, Premier. Cynthia Mulligan from City News.
That's the Premier answering a question about the Science Centre, but making an announcement alongside Solicitor General Michael Kersner, OPP Commissioner Thomas Carrick, and Toronto Police Chief Myron Demkiw in Scarborough this afternoon. Premier Ford talking about plans to tackle rising crime rates as the provinces push Ottawa to implement bail reforms and make changes to the Criminal Code of Canada. So what the Premier is announcing today is $112 million in new funding for programs aimed at improving bail compliance, new money for OPP, First Nations police, and municipal police services, including setting up bail compliance teams and investing in new technology to better monitor people out on bail. The Premier speaking this afternoon in Scarborough. It is 2:12 right now, 11 degrees. This is Toronto's breaking news, CP24. More news straight ahead. Stay with us.
When I took office, the Greenbelt was X, that figure.